Hi, I'm Renee.
Yes, you are. I'm Kent.
And we're back again to discuss, we're still on chapter 4, and this is about communication and dimensions.
Dimensions.
Well, dimensions is in the chapter on the light and the communication, and it's about expanding understanding. So that's why it's in that chapter. But we're going to start talking a little bit about dimensions. We also want to kind of break it down into more simplistic manner so that everybody can understand. And we're going to take some time, so we might have more than one video on dimensions.
Okay.
And this is from
The
Augmentation of Man.
Yes, Augmentation of Man. A study in Renaissance.
Yeah.
Okay.
Chapter 4.
I want to start by saying, on page 80, starting with page 80 of the book, each universe has many dimensions. There's more than one. Many dimensions. We here on Earth, in this universe, but here on Earth specifically, we live in the third dimension.
So as humans, we're very young in our learning.
How young are we?
Well, we're told humanity as a human is now has been here for 30,000 years. So,
which is extremely young.
And it doesn't account for
all universe.
You know, the other prototypes before the current man, I guess. But,
okay.
So we're still at the basics of learning, and we're learning the three dimensions and time. So
in space,
which is time makes up the fourth dimension.
In space.
And yes, and how they relate to each other. And so we are actually having a spiritual experience within a physical dimension of height, width, and depth, and how our physical bodies are able to maneuver within this space as we define it.
Okay, we are just learning. Mankind we are so just learning that we are in the process of learning the amount of dimensions, or how many dimensions just from this system alone, from this solar system, or from this universe that we haven't even begun to touch, and how many there are. But we're moving forward to trying to learn.
So each dimension has its own specific learning to be realized within that dimension. So when we talk about the first three dimensions, we're talking about the learning that we are realizing within this dimension of a three-dimensional space, and how time relates to that three-dimensional space. Now, time is not the way that we humans think of it.
Three-dimensional space. Okay. We learned time. We learned height, width, and depth. That's the three dimensions. Okay. Then we slightly touch on, and because beginning to learn or understand time as we use time, as compared to time outside of the human race, and how space relates to our space. Not the space that you see outside of Earth itself, but how it relates to our space, which eventually relate beyond Earth.
So each dimension contains its own quantum pathways. This would, to give you an idea of what that means, is the choices that are presented to us that we have access to as far as our decision making is concerned. So we are physically a spiritual being in a physical experience within a field of height, width, and depth, and there's an interfacing of time as the universe sees time which is the movement of energy. And so that would also be the movement of matter, because matter is energy. So as we are moving our physical body within this dimension of space, we are also learning about that space. And as we expand on the fourth dimension of time, we are also expanding our understanding of the three dimensions. You want to go into that further?
First of all, mankind has to learn the three dimensions. We are still in a learning process. Mankind does not know how to handle the three dimensions as we know it right now. There are many humans that have gone beyond that, but mankind in generalities has not learned how to handle the three dimensions which we live in. We need to explain how these dimensions work. So as a body, we have to learn how our energy moves our body, how it progresses through a lifetime.
So to further elaborate on time and the way that the universe sees time is the movement of energy through space. So as say I want to cross the street, my physical body is on one side of the street, and it takes energy for me to move my body to the other side of the street. So to get from point A to point B, there takes an expenditure of energy to make that happen. And that is the movement of time. Now, as humans, we tend to relate that to a clock and how long, as far as our clock is concerned, it takes to get from point A to point B. But in reality, it doesn't relate to a clock, because our clock is relative to how the Earth rotates around the sun and our spin. And if you were to be picked up and placed on another planet that has a different spin, maybe the planet's bigger, maybe it spins slower, maybe its rotation around its sun is different. But all of that time as we think of it would completely change, because it wouldn't apply to another planet. So now you can understand how our perception of time is incorrect. It's only related to the Earth and our movement around the sun and our rotation.
That's correct. And so the definition of time, we could say, is what we currently perceive as time. That's going from point A to point B. But outside, this is why we've said before, outside of our own plane, our Earth, there's no such thing as time as we see it in getting from outside of getting from point A to point B.
And also to add to that is time also involves the perceived pause between events. So if I go back to the example of trying to cross the street and I'm getting from point A to point B, and the pause in between being at point A and being at point B, there is a pause that takes to get to that next event, which would be standing across the street. So that plays into it, and it also plays into how we perceive time as being spent. So for example, if you're having to wait for something, it's going to seem like time is going really slow. It's a perception, because there is a longer pause between what you're doing currently and what you're waiting to happen, the next event.
And that relates to the space around us.
Right, what's going on
because
around our sphere.
Our space is determined by our events, and that space is only around us.
Now, likewise, if time seems to be going by very quickly, it's because the pause between events is shortened. So we have a rapid succession of things happening around us in our lives, or that we're engaged in, the events that we're creating that make time seem as though it's going faster, only because the pause between one event and the next event is much shortened. And so when we look back, there's a lot of events that happen very quickly, one after the other, as opposed to when we're looking at other events that happen with a longer pause in between the next event. And it seems like time's going much slower.
Okay, so space, fourth dimensional space, and speaking about time, space has to do with the space around us. As we understand, the more we understand, the wider the parameters of our space open up, become wider. For such as someone here on Earth that has never been off this Earth, the space, the parameters of that particular person, the space around them is so big. Those that have traveled outside of Earth, their space has widened. Their understanding has widened of all the things, all the quantum paths that put them to the position they're in now. Remember, you have a main quantum path, a main event, and all those are sub-quantum paths that you have a choice of taking off of the main event. So space, the time-space continuum is very real. They're related, but they're separate.
So, if you look at a baby, when a baby's born, and the space that they exist within is very small, the height, the room, width, and depth, or the space around their physical body, and they're not able to crawl, they're not able to move much. So as the baby grows and starts to crawl around, their understanding of space broadens because of their movement. So that's how time plays into it, because now they're able to move about in a wider dimensional space and explore something new. And so their understanding starts to broaden. So this continues on throughout a lifetime. We are always exploring the space around us, the three-dimensional world, but we don't really give it much thought. And as we move about, this is the time, the energy that is being expended as we move our physical body to explore and learn about our physical experience. And so, and it's much more than going out and hiking around the canyons or something like that. This is everything. If you injure a part of your body, say you injure your knee, how are you going to move about? How are you going to be able to move about to do the things that you need to accomplish within your space? And so even that's a learning lesson. So everything that we experience in the physical, we're learning about the three-dimensional field and the fourth dimension of time as we move about in that field.
So remember, space is what is around us, our space, and our understanding of our space will increase as our understanding increases. We reflect on our own choices throughout life, on our own sub-choices based on the main event of what we first decided. She mentioned buying a car. That's the main event.
I didn't mention that.
Well, okay, or not here. But
we had a discussion.
Before the video.
We had a discussion before the video, and it got a little too complicated.
About an hour and a half. But
so we decided to change the example.
But there are many quantum paths in the space that's provided around us. The universe has a space far beyond we can comprehend as humans, because we are too young to understand the complete quantum understanding of all that is. Okay, so we have to take a little bit of time. We have to learn, first of all, the third dimension. We as humans don't understand. Most humans don't understand what even a third dimension is. We haven't even contemplated it, let alone what value time and space, the fourth dimension of learning, even is. There are those that do. Very few, but there are those that do.
Now, Kent mentioned the quantum paths available, and each dimension has its own quantum paths available for exploration and learning. Within the third dimensional field, we have choices. So, perhaps we choose to learn how to play an instrument. Perhaps we choose to engage in a sports activity. Those are all quantum choices that we have. It's a part of the quantum field of choices that we have to choose from, that we can explore to learn. And as we do that, say we're learning how to play an instrument, we are learning how the movement of energy interfaces with this three-dimensional world. And same with sports. We're learning how to maneuver, and we're learning about energy, and with that physics and bodily mechanics and all that is related to our third dimensional experience. So this is just the basics that we're trying to get people to think about before we go on to, everybody wants to jump forward to higher dimensions, and we really have to understand what we're currently working on right now before we even start to talk about higher dimensions.
We can't even go to that higher dimension thing. We have to learn where we're at first. And as we as a human race goes outside of the Earth plane into space, and those that do, and understand the space around them in space, we begin to comprehend the vastness, which is far bigger than we ever realized. Far bigger.
As our space expands, we're learning more and more. And to expand our space, it involves our movement of our physical body, which is the time. And so the time-space continuum we are learning about through our choices that are presented to us within the quantum field of pathways or choices that are available to us. Not all quantum paths are presented. It depends on what dimension you were studying. And so...
depends on what path.
Well, yes, and then it depends, those paths that are presented.
Because the main path is choices. An event. You choose an event within the dimension. There are many, many, many events within a single dimension. And there's more than one dimension. There is a main dimension. Each planet has its own dimension, which there are sub-dimensions coming off of that, like spokes in a wheel, we'll say. And in those, each dimension coming off that main one for that particular planet, you choose an event that you want to learn.
So an event is anything that is, there's energy expended and something occurs out of that energy expansion. So, and it can be even the thought process. So
it could begin with that.
Something that through your reflection upon a choice that you made from the quantum paths available, there's an event that occurs, and then it's up to us to reflect on that event. So say, I choose to get mad at him.
That's one
and
choice.
I created an event, and so then that will result in an equal or greater.
And once I explain what I'm trying to get through her, and she begins to understand what I'm trying to explain, when I really get more detail on why this particular thing happens, then the event takes a different path.
Yes, and so and always reflection has to be a part of everything that we create. So every choice that we make, we need to reflect upon and grow and learn from it.
Yeah. So we'll begin. Well, I think probably we'll continue another video based on dimension as we speak about, and trying to continue to explain it for a higher level of understanding. And with that, many of you are going to wish, well, I need to get out of the space that I'm in, or not get out of it, but to expand the space that they've been in for many, many years. And then we'll talk about, okay, how do we do this if we do this? Because we have many sub-events or sub-choices on how to get out of it. And it's all up to each individual.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so.
And we really need to open our minds to the possibilities that really exist, because we tend to put ourselves into a box. We put parameters up where parameters don't exist, and we narrow our choices when we do that. And so if you get creative, you can think about expanding those parameters and climbing out of your box and making a lot more choices available.
As they say, then you will get new horizons.
Yes.
So with that,
peace be with you on your journey. All of our blogs are available. If you want to read the blogs, they're available on our website, verdience.com. And you just click up on the menu, those little 3 bars in the top right corner, and it'll present you with a drop-down menu that you can access the blogs from. They're all there. You can go back and reread them. And then, of course, all the other YouTubes.
Yeah.
So,
with that, you have a great week.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye.